Hello, everybody. I'm back again with Discovering Autism, and I have a guest named Heather. And say hello, Heather.
Hello. Would you like me to introduce myself?
Like you to what?
Would you like me to introduce myself?
Sure, please do.
Okay, my name is Heather. I live in Rhode Island. We'll get into that. I'm 42, and I have 2 degrees. One's in philosophy, one is in political science. I most recently worked for the state, caring for the poorest populations, and my focus has now shifted to caring for our population.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When did you find out that you were on the spectrum?
It was August of 2016, so well into my 40th year.
Wow. And what led you to, or you know, why? What took you so long? Maybe you know what I mean.
Well, like so many of us, I didn't know what autism was. It was this nebulous concept of, it seemed to be anyway, of, mostly it seemed to be children, and it seemed to be children that sort of had a palace of their own mind that they seemed to be trapped in, and no one was able to reach them. So it was almost like not quite a catatonic state, but it, from the depictions from movies and from the things that I'd seen, the other option was Rain Man, where he was very repetitive and clearly cognitively disabled in certain ways. That it didn't fit me at all, and not that that isn't part of the spectrum, because actually the guy who that was based off of is on the spectrum, but he's more savant-like. But I didn't know anyone who was on the spectrum. I didn't. It turns out I actually did know a bunch of people that were on the spectrum, just didn't know it. It's this thing that nobody had ever spoken of to me ever, and it was sort of just not in the realm of my personal experience. I never knew friends or family who had people on the like kids on the usually
Yep.
It's kids who get diagnosed first now. So it's the parents who get diagnosed afterward. But I don't have a large circle of friends, so how would I know, parents with kids? I just wouldn't. And I don't have kids, and I'm not married, so I wouldn't.
Right.
That just wouldn't be part of my realm. It just was not. They didn't never. None of the therapists I had ever been to had ever mentioned the concept, nor had in any way. Most often, when you go to a therapist these days, and this is even going back to 2001, they don't normally talk about a diagnosis unless you actively ask them for one, or say, "I would like to know if I am X." But if you just go in there and go for therapy, you could go in and out, and they may have a diagnosis for you, but they won't tell you.
It had been quite a while since I've. I just discovered this for my autism back in the beginning of the year, and the 2nd of January actually, and I had other issues as far as what I thought was depression and some other things that were happening. I mean, long story short was that basically they're saying, oh yeah, it's your past, your childhood, something you're not resolved, or something that hasn't resolved, or it's depression, or and you're right. I had no no concept. I didn't know there was anything. I thought it was normal. I mean, I thought it was neurotypical normal. And so that you're in a neurotypical world, and all the neurotypical answers then you think are going to fit you. So you're not thinking outside that box.
Right.
Now, what made you think outside the box? What made you think even autism? How'd you, or, you know?
Well, it wasn't. It was not my own readings or my own efforts, because I basically thought I had myself fairly well figured out, and in many ways I had.
Uh-huh.
I was very introverted, I should say introspective in my 20s, as far as trying to figure out what I wanted to be in life, and what were the topics that really interested me. What did I want to research? What did I want to, what did I want to surround myself with? Because I had grown up raised by television, and so I didn't even know what I liked when I graduated high school. So I didn't have hobbies. I didn't have books I read. I didn't have anything. I had TV shows I knew inside and out. So I spent the duration of my marriage, which was short-lived, reading, like autodidact, 9 hours a day, from the time he left to go to work to the time he got home. I read all day long. And on topics of all different types: history, philosophy, mythology, religion, not so much politics at that point, but anthropology, things of that nature. Those were the things that really drew in my attention. And I didn't think of them at the time as special interests, but more of, I want to understand the world around me a little better. I want to answer some questions I have about the way the world works. And it wasn't until this current job that I had a problem, because I had done something that was ethically correct, and it got me in trouble. And it was not nearly, well, it wasn't a big deal for me, but I guess it could have gotten the state in trouble. But as far as I was concerned, I was following the law, and they were breaking it, so it was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And my vocational counselor at the time said, "Are you sure?" She said, "You got to," basically she was saying, you have to think of yourself first. And I'm like, what?
No. You said this was
That's
this.
not my nature. My nature is to do the right thing, over and above my own needs.
Was this college, you said, or was this high school?
No. I'm talking specifically about my job, my most recent job.
Okay. Oh, your job. I'm sorry. Okay, that's what I missed. Okay.
That's okay. So at my current job, I had a problem, and I had I don't want to get into details,
sure,
but basically
right.
I had done something ethically correct.
Gotcha.
Which could have gotten my supervisor in trouble, and could have gotten the state in trouble. Whether it did or didn't, not really my concern.
Uh-huh.
I wasn't really notified, certainly one way or another, after the fact, but it did get me in trouble with the hierarchy for having, even though I asked a different supervisor if what I did was, is it okay if I do this, and they said yes. Well, they were not content with that. They still tried to fire me anyway. And my vocational counselor said to me, "You need to think of yourself first." And I said, "What?"
Uh-huh.
And that concept was completely foreign to me. The idea that I would forego what's right for my own personal benefit is not just unfair, it's unethical, and it bothers me. And it really bothered me that she said that. even. And she said, "Are you sure there isn't more going on there? Are you sure there isn't like a personality disorder or autism or something?" And I'm like, "Autism?" Like I was stunned. I'm like, "What? Autism? What?"
Really?
And I mean, I was like, the word just was like, "What?" And personality disorder. I had previously been misdiagnosed with a personality disorder when I separated from my ex-husband because my therapist at the time could not understand that the semi sort of codependent connection I had with my ex-husband was partially due to being autistic, that when you find someone who is very kind to you, that you sort of latch onto them.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's part of our way of, you've been really nice to me. This doesn't happen very often. Let me try and get more of this niceness kind of thing.
And another thing, it also a feeling of obligation. Did you feel that? I mean, maybe not in that particular situation, but also I've found that, like I got into a relationship, and it being like a 2-year relationship that ended up that I because the person was nice to me, I felt like I sort of needed to be friends then. And so it developed into more than friendship when I never really wanted it to be more than friendship. But it was like I kind of got caught up in the obligation side of it instead of the this is what I want or this is what I should say. I mean, that was, I guess I was in my 30s then, late 30s, early 30s, I mean. Probably. And I mean, so I'm just different. I've made notes of different things you've said, and I don't need to actually go back through them, but you're talking about high school and trying to figure out what it is you even liked. That was me exactly. You said, and to understand how the world works is the way you put it. And it's sort of like what's the meaning of life is how I think I might have put it. Like, why am I even here? What am I doing here? What is the purpose of all this? I was trying to figure it out that way. And I just thought that was sort of interesting because I don't know if
it's not exactly the same kind of thing because my question was very different than that. The why am I here sort of thing became a philosophical thing that was a later concern. My first major concern was, why did society go so terribly wrong for women?
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't about humanity as a whole, but why is it wrong for women? Why are women wronged repeatedly, again and again, in so many different societies? How do we allow this? And why do we shame women for actions of men? All of these things it's ever pressing for women because it's part of our everyday lives. This isn't like, something you muse on philosophically. It's something we are confronted by every time we step out the door. If we're out late, we have to watch where we walk. It's part of, if I have a male friend, he might be expecting more than I think he's expecting. Or, if I go on a first date, I have to be out in public because this person may try to hurt me. Or, like, this is part of our lives.
Uh-huh.
Men are more the cause of our damage than any physical ailment. So, this is a real serious thing. And this isn't just like, kind of ethereal, kind of abstract thing. This is a very concrete. Why are things wrong for women, and how can I fix them?
And yeah.
And I spent years on that topic. Years. I would say a good 20 years of my life has been spent studying that topic from many different angles.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do have some solutions, but I need time to sit and write. is really what it comes down to, because I need to put all those things down from these different perspectives. I wish I had taken notes at the time or recorded my thoughts as they developed, but as always, I'm good at reading stuff and coming to certain conclusions, but I have a much harder time like taking notes and stuff and like being, oh, that's a good point. I should write down. And what page is that? Okay, and what's the bibliography here? Okay, that should be there. Like, I don't think that way. I tend to just sort of let my brain absorb the information. Then I just sort of know stuff that other people don't. But if you ask me, what's the source for something specifically, it is a university text that it came from, but can I remember that individual piece of knowledge where it came from? Probably not.
No, you said this about, you said it was 2012 that you were diagnosed, or that you discovered it? I don't know if you're officially diagnosed or not, but as far as the autism?
No, it's 2016.
16.
2 years ago.
Okay. Yeah.
And yes, I am officially diagnosed.
Okay. How has that changed your life so far? I mean, what has been the process? Well, at the time that they, of course, you're saying that the counselor or the therapist had even brought this up, and once you started looking into it, did you go, wow, I think that person could be correct? What was that moment like?
At first, I didn't laugh it off, but I kind of, rolled my eyes, and I was offended that, not that I was offended that someone thought that because I think in terms of ethics that there must be something quote unquote wrong with me. So I was offended initially by that concept, but then the more one of my friends online, she's autistic and her daughter is a bit more profoundly autistic. She said, "Oh yeah, you might very well be Rain Woman."
Wow, really?
And I said, "You think?" She said, "Oh yeah, you could be."
Because she knows you well.
She
She knows you well enough to be. I mean, is that why she made that observation, or is she just saying in general? Yeah, anybody. I mean, there's. I mean, did she have a reason to say that? Did she know you well enough to say, yeah, come to think of it, I think you could be, or was it more of a
well, I think we've talked enough that I think she could have an idea.
Gotcha.
But I still wasn't. Not by just saying that was I convinced, and she did send me a link to a book, and I can't remember what it's called now. Okay. But I read some of it, and it didn't sound like me.
Uh-huh.
So again, I brushed it off again. And this went on for almost a full year, where I started to read on things, and but by the time I had gotten to the point where I was like, all right, you know what, I'm gonna go to a psychologist. I'm gonna find a PhD. I'm gonna find someone who is, Ivy League educated, who has, many years in the business, has enough knowledge that they should be able to determine one way or another. And it shouldn't be any question after that. It should be pretty cut and dry, right?
Right.
So, and I did take some of the tests too, the Baron Cohen test, and I always scored like under enough. So if the passing score would have been 70, I scored about like a 58 or something. It wasn't quite enough to qualify under the Baron Cohen standards.
Okay.
So I thought, well, it's possible that I may have some spectrum-ish personality traits, but maybe I'm not really, I'm not really autistic. So, and then I started to do a little more, I started to do a little more research into like watching YouTube videos of people and, listening a little bit more. And I at that point, I did not find stuff that was specific to women on the spectrum,
Okay.
because I didn't know to think that would even be a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Because we most often we're taught growing up that men and women are basically, we have more in common than we have different. So I would not automatically think that, a female autistic and a male autistic person are would be that different. So I just followed, the white male criteria, and I didn't quite fit it. So I went to this woman, and I sat down with her, and we talked about, my life a little bit, and reasons why I thought, reasons why I was there, basically. And I told her, the stories and a couple stories from my life and things like that. And at the end, I said, well, do you think I might be autistic? She said, I knew in 15 seconds.
Oh, wow. Isn't that amazing? So I was going to say something, too. When I first started, I have sort of a similar story. I mean, where I had a coworker about 4 years, maybe 5 years ago now, that had a son that was autistic. And a number of times she would talk about, what they were doing for interventions as far as socialization skill training or something like that. And as she was talking about this, there was some strange connection I felt. And I don't remember now exactly what it was. But at one point, I had actually asked I asked her. I must be really tired. I talked to her, and I said something about, is it possible that I could, I said, there's something about this that's really connecting with me. And I don't even remember her response, but I do remember thinking, with the kind of traits that he has, that's nothing like me. And so I just discarded it. I just dismissed it. And unfortunately, but when I did start looking into it, the first blog I went to was by a woman, and so I was reading all these traits by women and their stories and everything, and it was like, yeah, I know where you're, and so I find that there's so much information by women out there. They seem to be more active in putting things out. That was my first connection, was with how women's autism expressed themselves, and I still connected with it. That was like a defining moment for me. It's like you're talking about things that no one else I've ever talked to about these. You're talking about what's going on in my head. You're talking about what's going on in my life that I've never shared, and that's what just convinced me. That's what was the connection there for me.
Well, once she had said that, that's when I started to do more serious research into women on the spectrum, and that's when I found Tony Atwood. That's when I found this Tanya Ann Marshall and her blog on trying to create a criteria for women, and then just various videos and blogs and things. That's when I started to take it far more seriously, and we were at that point we were working towards an official diagnosis. So she was working on then a report for me, so I spent a lot of time when I was not in work looking this up and trying to, at first I was excited. I was like, I was excited to learn something new about myself, and then, it was like 2 weeks later, or maybe it was after I got back from Great Britain. I went to England for 2 weeks, and when I came back, I sat down with her, and the mood had shifted, and it stopped being like just, like now I have a community, now I have, there's all these people who are really like me, and I started connecting on Facebook and things like that with all these different people. It was like, wow, there's all these people, and then it became grief. Why didn't I know this sooner?
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't anyone suggest this to me sooner?
Well,
so many things in my life could have been different if I had known sooner. And that grief has been kind of on and off since that point. And you're talking about, how have I developed since that time? And, first I was sort of defiant of, there's nothing about me is really disabled. I'm just different, and so on and so forth. And now I'm at the point where I can honestly say that I do believe there's a certain, I wouldn't say it's necessarily being autistic itself, but more of the things that go along with it, some of the comorbidities,
mm-hmm.
and sometimes some of the damage you go through in life that causes you to become disabled. If I had not been through what I had been through, I might not have had anxiety and PTSD,
mm-hmm.
for example.
Right. Yeah.
And that together, those things make me disabled. They make me extremely exhausted. And the part of autism that might be considered a disability, at least for me anyway, is that social component where, like, even at 42, I still cannot read a room. I can feel emotions in a room, but I can't tell why people are feeling what they're feeling. And I'm sorry. I can walk into a room and tell everyone is judging me.
You can't tell why people are feeling what they're feeling, you said?
Right. Like, so if I go into a room,
okay,
and I sense anger or sadness or happiness, I can't tell why. I know it's there. I just don't know what caused it, and I can't tell from the expressions on people's faces what's going on. And sometimes you can tell when people are like, they sort of have a look on their face like everybody's got a secret and you're not included.
I'm trying to think if I'm aware of that. I think I feel differently in a crowd of people. I haven't been really social for a long time. As a matter of fact, that's one reason I started doing these videos, was to hopefully get out and do actual interviews with people instead of just sitting here back at home. In a way, it's kind of backfired because I'm still here at home. I'm still sitting here. At least I'm getting out a little. I mean, electronically, but when I think back
that's how we are. We tend to be more isolated.
I know.
And that's just that's sort of par for the course for us. Some of us, I mean, you may find that there are some of us who really want to connect with people, and there's some people who are like, get the hell away from me. If you want questions, you best submit them in writing, and I will reply to them, and they will take their time, and you'll get 6 pages per question, but they don't want to talk to you.
Yeah. Well, see, what I was going to say was what really kind of led me to, I was in a real different space when I found that I was autistic. It was getting close to a year ago now. So, and it started with, I think, with the seasonal affect disorder, and I'll call it that. But it was the earlier darkness, the long darkness. It was sort of I wasn't seeing my family or my sister's family, which is the only family I've got, and it's like something came up, and usually I would see them like for Thanksgiving and maybe Christmas, and things came up, but I couldn't. And it wasn't so much, it was just a combination of things. It was work stress and everything else. And I was getting more and more depressed and in a very dark space. And I'm almost like, don't like sharing this because it's a little bit, I don't want to say embarrassing, but it's a very private kind of a feeling thing to share. But I was to the point, yeah, you'll go, yeah, you were in a dark space. I was to the point where I was like begging God to say, please don't, I don't want this to go on much longer. I really don't. I see no purpose. I have no future. I feel like it's a dead end job. I feel like things are going to keep getting worse. And if you care about me at all, let's send the heart attack or let's send the cancer and make it a quick cancer, please. I mean, those are the kind of thoughts I was, and then things got worse at work. And I had a huge breakdown in communication where I'm going, whoa, what just happened?
Suicide is really high in our community, right?
Oh, yeah. But hey, I say this not with any kind of pride, but I've had 2 attempts.
I didn't think it would be with pride, but it's definitely, it's something that you should talk about, and it's something that I've had my thoughts. I've never officially attempted, but the thoughts have been there. I mean, you can't not. If you're in a terrible situation, and I can say within the last year, there has definitely been reasons why the thoughts have come hard and heavy. It's not been a good time for me. Yeah. Actually, the last 2 years, and not because of my diagnosis. My diagnosis has been an upside in a lot of darkness that has happened to me since then. That was completely unrelated, but it was there.
Yeah. Well, it was.
But I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that is it. I did want to say that just because it's something that people need to hear. It's really important that people need to hear that this is not an uncommon feeling, and it's something that should be shared, and it should be. It's something that needs to be addressed. So, if someone has those feelings, go find someone to talk to, because it's not. Don't hold it in. Don't bottle it in, because you don't let that fester. Don't let that become, your way of viewing the way to escape the world, right. or become like in a weird way like a pleasurable fantasy. Don't let it go that far.
No.
Talk to somebody. Get help.
But you know what makes it so hard, and I think this is why suicide ideation is like 75% of from what I remember reading. Some statistics was that they get 75% ideation. It might have been 2/3, but I think it was 75. Anyway, and I can understand why, because all my life, I was searching for what the hee-ho is going on here. Why are See, I also had the what I thought was a father that was so oppressive that that's what I thought all this was coming from. So that's when I would talk about it with a counselor or something. It's like, yeah, I think it was, the oppression of my father. Well, okay, we need to work through that. Well, it wasn't that. And it never seemed to be the answer. There was always something else. There was always some shadow or some influence in my life that was like, there's something going on here. There's something going on here. There's, and you go through, you beat your head against this, this wall of like, well, what is it? What is it? And, it's the energy and the frustration. It's just the whole combination of things. I can see why people are driven, to at least be thinking about it, because it's a never-ending treadmill that you're on trying to figure this out, and it's exhausting. And so that's why. But anyway, it was a relief for me. Especially because I was coming to a pinnacle. I was coming to a focus of all these things going on in my life, and it had gone on all my life last January. And when I found that answer, when I found that key, it was one of the most amazing moments. It was the most amazing moment of my life. It really was. It was like, I'm here. I found it. Oh my God, I found it. This is what I've been looking for. This is, and it was a release. It was a relief for me.
Yep. Yep. And I felt that too. I felt that. Like, one of the first things was, it's not my fault.
Yes.
It's not my fault.
Yes.
It's not my fault that I am exhausted.
Yes.
At the end of a week from trying to pretend to be normal.
Yes. Yes.
It's not my fault that I can't get ahead in an environment where people just do not accept me, and it's not my fault that I can't seem to fit in with any group of people, office settings in particular. I just can't fit in. Oh. And, it's one thing if people were tolerant, but in this last situation, there was no tolerance. There was no decency. There was pettiness and backstabbing and, pretending to be nice to you for the purposes of trying to weasel information out of you that could be used against you at some later time, kind of stuff. And really, the worst of female behavior that exists. It's toxic.
There's just two. This is the differences in personality. This is why I think the spectrum. The people are so different on the spectrum because because of my father. I think this is one thing I will say was because of my father. I became totally passive. I became passive to the point that I was not even acknowledging what I felt and thought. And I was just a leaf in the wind, blowing wherever life took me. And you weren't that way. You were very, I don't want to say aggressive, but you were.
Oh, I am aggressive.
Well, it may not just be aggressiveness. I don't know. I don't know well enough to. I don't know you well enough to put a label on what it was. That's why I'm really. So if it was aggressive, then good. That's a good word I chose.
It's a healthy trait for women. I think more women ought to be aggressive, but
as opposed to me being passive, it took you on a different route, and
yes, and it's I bet you it's similar in certain ways, because for a man to be passive or for a woman to be aggressive is to be outside of the gender box.
Interesting point. Yes. Wow. You're right. And that's probably why I never have really related with men.
And why I never really related to women.
Isn't that amazing? That's an amazing point. I find that fascinating. But how it changes how we got through and coped with our autism too. It's an interesting issue or topic that we've sort of have come up on here, of how what we became and how we dealt with our autism was so different.
Well, I definitely found. All right. So, how I was not a product of any particular familial tie, right?
Okay.
My personality was just the way my personality was. So much so that, from age 9, I was defiant and aggressive, and that type of thing was it was innate within me. The idea that I could, be this pretty little princess kind of thing just didn't suit me. It never did. And for a very, very brief period, I liked the color pink, and I wanted to wear a pretty dress or whatever. But that ended really fast, and then the real me came through awfully quick, and the real me was very much a feminist from age 9 on, very, overtly. And I just could not fit that mold, and I actually tended to get along with men better. I hung out with men more of the time than women, because it was men were a lot easier to understand, because they were generally, there was no little game.
Huh.
There was no, it wasn't complicated. It wasn't feely. It was, hey, let's play this thing, or, let's go outside and run around, or, let's, talk about chicks or whatever as I got older, whatever. And I had insight into the female mind that men couldn't get from other men. So I was valued by men for my insight into what it meant to be female.
Interesting.
Because they didn't, it's not something they would get from their guy friend.
Right, definitely.
So I was instantly valued for that knowledge, and they kept me around because I could help them. If they had a girlfriend and they were having problems, they could sit down with me and be like, this is what's going on. I don't understand. Please help me.
Wow.
And I could help them.
Yeah.
And I could solve their relationship problems in 20 minutes or less. And, I was always seen as one of the guys. It was so much easier. I did have female friends too, but most of my female friends were on the spectrum, and anytime it was attempt at a female friendship that was not, it didn't work out.
This is something I just would like to talk about at some time. I just want to mention it so we can maybe go back to it. But
Sure.
having that perspective you're saying of these males saying, this is just a classic. This is a point I really want to make, because being neurodiverse is like I'm just use your example of a male not understanding what the female's mind is like. Well, we're neurodiverse and we don't understand what the neurotypical mind is like. We need neurotypical people to be able to give us that insight. And they need neurodiverse people to give them the neurodiverse. Oh, is that right? Yeah, and I say that right. Yeah. I mean,
I'm not sure that they are self-aware enough to be able to really explain themselves well enough to us.
Wow, that is another incredible point. I wonder that too. Isn't that
the closest you'll get is actual philosophy.
Say it again.
You will find an understanding of the human mind.
I see. Philosophy.
You're going to find a lot of philosophers who are also autistic, but occasionally you get someone that was not, and you can see an understanding of how they view the world.
Well, the only thing I want to do is say there is an exception. I have a good friend who's neurotypical, whose husband was neurodiverse, and he was ADHD, big time ADHD, and doesn't know it and was denying it. And their marriage just about, it actually had tanked once and was treading water, and she was talking to me about this, and then she came upon one day other women talking about their husbands in the same situation, a husband that was neurodiverse or that was ADHD, and that they found out why these things were going on in their marriage. And she started reading this, and she had that same epiphany that we did, finding that we were neurodiverse. She finds out her husband's neurodiverse, and she's like, oh my gosh, the answer, the key I've been looking for. And she has studied that so much. She said, Tom, I'll never know what it's like to be neurodiverse, but I have learned how to read into his behavior where I can tell him what he's thinking. I can tell him why, exactly what, you heard me say this, didn't you? He said, yeah. I said, that's not what I said. And, and she had learned. So there are people out there who are neurotypical that I think that maybe have kids or a spouse or a sibling that is neurodiverse, that they probably have read into it. Those are the people I want to find. Those are the people I want to be able to say, help me. What is it, and so anyway, but we got off on that tangent, but you made a great point there, and I'm just wondering, is that true, that neurotypicals are that, whatever it is, that I don't want to say shallow, because like I say, there are some people that aren't. There's exceptions to that rule.
No, I don't think it's so much shallow. I think it's to be able. It's one thing to be introspective enough to recognize your own personality traits or your own idiom, whatever that is, right?
Uh-huh.
It's a whole other layer to try and explain to someone, to understand well enough us, to be able to describe to us. It's like teaching. How am I going to describe this? Trying to come up with a good analogy for this. I kind of think of it in the way of going to like Japan or Korea and teaching English to people who have no concept of our idiomatic expressions, or
okay.
And don't really understand enough English to even understand English. Like, how are you explaining English when you don't speak their language? How
Right.
are you going to describe their your language to them?
I see what you're saying. Yeah. And I think that's always okay. And that gets, I 100%. I mean, that's what I think. When I've made responses, like there's a website called Quora, Quora, I think it's pronounced Quora, and they ask these questions. And one of the things I've said often is that I do not think that it's realistic that I can never understand what the neurotypical mind is like, because I'm not neurodiverse, and so we can only ever get around we can only kind of get small, understandings or whatever. We can only get so close to that understanding, and the opposite is true. So that we've got this divide there that realistically we can't bridge. They cannot know what we're experiencing, and we cannot know what they are experiencing ever. So that redefines.
Not completely, no. I mean,
yeah.
I have glimmers, like little, gleaning into, certain aspects, and like I can read an individual's expressions very well.
Okay.
So I've gotten very good at that because that became one of my special interests.
Uh-huh.
But that doesn't mean I don't miss things. I do miss things.
But that doesn't mean that you're neurotypical, no matter how well you can read them.
Oh, no. I'm not saying that.
I know that, but I'm just saying.
I'm only saying that I can glean some of the way that they think from the way that they react.
Right. This is so important for them to know.
When I see someone, for example, take something I say personally, when I don't mean it personally.
Yeah.
I can at least glean from that person that they view the world through very specific rose-colored glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And that they are not capable of stepping outside of themselves and outside of their experience to understand how something could be true that doesn't include them.
Huh. Yeah. Yep. That's... Yeah, no, do you think that neurodiverse people have a little bit easier time at that, that they can step out? And I'm wondering if that is because...
Well, we kind of have to. I mean, we're a minority. When any minority learns how the majority thinks.
But do you think it's also do you think it's not related to the autism then? Is why we're able to do that?
No, I think any minority
It's a
group
minority. Okay.
is basically forced.
Right.
Because
right. Okay.
whether you
That's a good
are
point.
female, a person of color, whether you're autistic, whether you're, whatever your difference is, you learn very quickly that you are not part of that majority, and you learn how the majority sees itself.